What's up, everybody? I'm David Hain. Welcome to episode 216 of the A to D From Addict to Disciple podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, please like, subscribe, follow, and share the link with your friends. If you'd like to get our curriculum, you can get the paperback or ebook of From Ashes to Destiny on Amazon. When we come back, we'll get into this episode entitled One Truth. Welcome back to episode 216 of the A to D From Addict to Disciple podcast entitled One Truth. I want to give a big welcome to my friends in recovery from the U.S., South Africa, and Australia for their participation in this episode. We're going to run it as a group session, and as I always do, I'll keep them anonymous, but I'll be saying their answers as if it is a live group meeting. So guys, here's the question for today's episode. What's one truth that you learned in childhood or in addiction or in recovery that has become a core value in who you are as a man? By core value, I mean it's stronger than just a belief. It defines who you are. It's something you always want to share with a child, with a friend, or even with a stranger you meet. You got it? Okay, Ben, would you like to start us out? Sure would, David. What I'm about to say is probably going to sound completely insane, but it speaks to your question about the core value of who I really am even now in recovery. There was a time when I was a heroin addict, and I was in a dope house, and there was another guy in the dope house sitting across from me, and I had 3 packs of heroin. When you're in addiction, you are very stingy, and the last thing you want to do is share your dope with anyone. But this guy was sick because he had not had any heroin for a few hours, and I knew that he didn't have any on him, so I gave him one of my heroin packets. Well, a couple years later, I met him in prison as an inmate at a medical call. He was being transferred to get his arm amputated because sticking needles in his arm had worn out his veins so much that his arm was decaying and they were going to have to amputate. Long story short, he said to me, "I remember you, man. You gave me that heroin packet when we were in that house." I could not believe what I was hearing. When he said that, I remembered and started crying. And we talked about how the Lord saved us from that life of heroin, even though the consequences still lingered. Anywho, I still feel like I'm that same person. My core value is that I hate seeing people without. I still want to fill those needs now in a healthy way for people that are homeless or in addiction or in prison. And even then, as a drug addict, I couldn't stand to see somebody sick and not doing well when I had it within my own power to help fix it a little bit. I hope that makes sense. Shaw. Thanks, Ben. That's really a great opening truth or core value that has always been inside of you. And I really like the way you're walking it today in a healthy way for people that are homeless or in addiction or in prison or wherever you meet them. Charlie, what do you think about this question? Well, David, I like this topic too. My core value is that everyone is equal. Everyone matters the same. Each person gets some of the blessing, even the passerby, even someone who didn't show up. We take what we have out to others to share. When I was a young boy, my grandparents were this example. Living in a farm community under the DuPonts of Delaware, this was the community way. I also remember one time my father and I were together. We were poor and struggling to have shelter of our own at this time in our lives. However, my father always worked, so we had some money. Well, this day we were cut down to our last $5 or $10. just enough to purchase a sandwich as we were hungry. And walking into the store to get the sandwich, I was hungry, man. However, walking in, there was a person lying on the pavement. We talked to this person. I don't know what he said, but my dad did. So we went in to get the sub sandwich, and oh boy, was I looking forward to it. We were eating good today. But on the way back to our car, we passed this person again, and my dad handed this person our sub sandwich. I couldn't understand this. I was upset. I asked Dad, why? He said, son, we can go somewhere else where we can get some food, but this person cannot. That has stuck with me all of my days. As hungry as I was, there was something that stirred in my spirit that day. Till this day, the least of our fellow man is first in my heart. And anyone from poor to wealthy, sickness to healthy, from broken to healed, they are welcome to have my first or my last item of possession. Come in and belong. Share in our blessings, please. Wow, Charlie, that's such a great example of how this core value, this one truth, was passed down from your grandparents to your dad, and from your dad to you in a very meaningful way over a hoagie, over a sub sandwich when you were hungry. And I think it's so important that this has become that core value that you will always remember. Eddie, what do you think of this topic? Well, David, I first learned to acknowledge that I was an addict, and thereafter admitting and asking for help. That became my testimony. I made a promise to myself that I would tell whoever I could about my journey as an addict and how, by God's grace, I managed to overcome it. I strongly believe that if you've been through so much and experienced Christ in such an awesome way, it would be an injustice to yourself and others in addiction not to testify about your experience. I also find myself often having a general conversation about my journey to non-believers as well, getting them to understand that my current position was only made possible by God's grace. I will never ever be embarrassed to tell anyone of what God has done in my life. Shaw, good stuff, Eddie. I can see how your testimony has become that one truth that you share with anyone and everyone. Dante, how about you? Well, David, for me, the key to growth is in the ability to be vulnerable around those who love you, challenge you, and care about you the most. And a second part, that you stay in awe of your personal power, that you use it and let others see it in its most useful form. When I was early in recovery, I had both these statements filtered into my mind. I believe it was God who shared these things with me, and I see both of them as equally important: to be vulnerable with those who care about our welfare and want to see our growth in our life occur, and then the personal responsibility that as you grow, as you become more aware of who you are a child of God with value and purpose, that you live in your purpose and do it with boldness and confidence because of whom you belong to. When we are loved and we know we are loved, we are capable of great things. So true, Dante. And it's easy to see in your life how the two values intertwine as you stay vulnerable with those who care and walk that out as you live your purpose in life. Thanks for that, Dante. Harry, what do you think? Well, David, there is one truth that I had with me growing up as a kid, and that was we must always take care of our elderly and the widows. My dad was an excellent role model in showing love for others, and irrespective, he battled alcoholism, people still loved him and didn't worry about the alcoholic in him. He made time for people and visited people on a weekly basis, or simply picked up the phone and called people to check up on them. When I left home after school and moved to another city, it was more of an escape from my parents. Once I settled into a job, I still made it my responsibility to take care of my parents with some financial assistance, knowing deep down in my heart that the money I send, the majority will be used to support their addiction. But now in society, I still try my best to help widows and the less fortunate in my area, as I am a strong believer that it's better to help your neighbors, because when you're in need, your neighbors are the first ones that will be there for you. And I've seen it growing up as a child. When we had nothing, our neighbors helped out in any way or any kind of way that they could. Now, as a grown man, the township where I live is a very closed community, and the elderly are sometimes abandoned by their children due to poverty and drug addiction. It's sad, because I don't have parents anymore, and I wish I still had them around to show how God changed my life around from addictions. But the kids that are in my circle see the actions or roles we play in the community, and we guide them to practice the same principles in giving and caring for others less fortunate. Good stuff, Harry. This is another great example of how a father can pass on a core value to us that becomes the one truth that gives us purpose and meaning at any age and whatever community we find ourselves. Freddie, you ready to close this out today? It'd be my pleasure, David. My one truth, my core values, authenticity. The quality of being authentic or genuine. And I like a quote by the comedian Lucille Ball. She said, "It's better to be a first-rate version of yourself than a second-rate version of someone else." You got it? I'm working on being the first-rate version of myself. And I've embraced this value more completely in recovery over the past 9 years. I say this because in addiction, from age 15 to 53 years old, I could never be my true self. I was living a double life, pretending that everything was okay, when in fact, I was ready to explode or implode with depression, anxiety, fear, resentment, you name it. There was a huge hole in my soul. I desperately needed physical, emotional, and spiritual healing. I couldn't go more than a few hours without drinking. But recovery has offered me a chance to be truly honest and move toward the best version of myself. I've been able to clean up the wreckage of my past and truly be more pure. And you know what? I'm okay with who I am today. Yeah, quirky, eccentric, sociable, confident, empathetic, but humble some of the time. You see, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less often. It's important to know yourself and love what you end up being. And I want to challenge all of us that we should never grow to resent the man in the mirror. Good words to close us out, Freddie. I really like the way you found your one truth of authenticity in recovery and how you're living it out by really liking who you are today. You're okay with who you are today, and you know yourself and you love yourself. Thanks, guys, for all you shared today. I'm sure you've touched a lot of people around the world. Thanks for listening to this episode of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast. If you were saying, you know what, that's really touched a spot in me. I need to start focusing on what's the one truth that I have inside. What's the core value that I want to live out? Then I want to encourage you to reach out, join a group, talk to a friend or a sponsor, Message me on the link in this podcast or by email at davidfromatoD@gmail.com. Or you can go to my website, www.fromatod.org, and click on the contact page. But whatever you do, get in touch with this one truth that's inside of you. Tune in Monday for our next episode, and as always, stay safe and stay resilient.